Whenever I acknowledge the fact that I am both a trans activist as well as a feminist, I run the risk of coming to face with a rather cliched remark as to the supposed incompatibility of these two social movements. This idea seems to rise up from a lack of understanding around what it means to be a trans woman or a trans man, as well as how language is utilized in society. Ultimately, it all falls back to just that, a discussion on how we as people utilize the word gender. You see, there are individuals out there who attempt to utilize feminist discussion out of context and apply it to a topic it never even touched upon, whilst changing the definitions of a word or equivocating them. What I'm discussing is the social construction of gender via norms and values. In this, society dominates an individual and attempts to assimilate who they are into one of two preset categories, often based upon their biological sex. Meanwhile, trans activism and queer theory discusses the celebration and the acceptance of a person's self-declared gender identity. Now, in both of these cases, the two phrases are often shortened down to the singular word gender. Both of these words have different meanings dependent on the context. Having dealt with creationists and even general theists for so long, I have seen how this is a trait common to language and thus allows for a dishonest usage. A form of semantic trickery takes place where an individual begins an argument whilst utilizing one definition prior to switching to a secondary definition partway through their argument to bolster said argument's position. This fallacy is often termed as an equivocation fallacy. One such example is how creationism utilizes the word theory. In a colloquial context, this word refers to a suggestion, a guess, if you will, whilst a theory of science is a substantiated claim which has stood the test of time, such as germ theory and atomic theory. Rather similarly, individuals looking to divide trans activism and feminism apart will utilize the shortened version of gender roles and feminist critique of said gender roles before switching to the shortened versions of gender identity and claim them to be one and the same. To display the differences between the two usages, we can turn the two into simple sentences, substituting the word of gender for X and Y. X will make reference to gender identity, as discussed by trans activism and queer theory, whilst Y will refer to the roles and social norms based off a society's notions on how X should act. The first, I am X, where X may refer to man, woman, or even other, is a self-declarative statement on one's person. This self-declarative is therefore empowering, as a person is taking back what has historically been dictated by society, which typically view gender and sex as one and the same. Meanwhile, the second statement of you are X, therefore you must act according to Y, where Y may refer to such things as domestic division of labor, work occupation, or emotional state, is disempowering, as it is a demand made by society from both the start of you are X, which enforces a cis-normative binary, up to the end with you must act according to Y, which removes freedom of choice based upon an aspect of identity. Two examples of this could be, you are a man, therefore you must never cry, or "You are a woman, therefore your place is at home." These two statements are nothing alike the self-assertive "I am a man" or "I am a woman." This is why trans activism is not incompatible with feminism. It is true that there are trans exclusionary radical feminists, yet these are a prejudiced minority who believe that a person born of male sex can never change. Rather, they believe a trans woman is and will always be a man, appropriating a woman whilst conducting what they have coined as covert rape. In an ultimate twist of irony, they ultimately believe this due to the claims of gender roles around rape and violence to be biologically set, making them closer to your average anti-feminist and conservative Christian than your actual trans-inclusive feminist. Yet this is a minority of feminism which is rapidly losing its footing amongst the movement. Likewise, there are a few more liberal feminists who fail to grasp their double standards when they target trans women for not shaving their legs or attempting to pass. Yet this is more down to individual trans ignorance over actual incompatibility between feminism and trans activism. For the most part, I would say that the two groups share many of the same goals. Returning to the notion of passing, this is a phrase utilized by individuals who are passing judgment over a trans individual's identity. Ultimately, whether this is intended as a compliment or not, it is plain insulting. The very notion of passing reduces who a person is, not down to how they see themselves, but rather how others judge them based off arbitrary standards on what it means to be a man or a woman. Therefore, to talk about whether someone passes is not just incredibly transphobic, but also entirely sexist as well. Trans men and trans women share all the exact same variation which is seen in cisgender men and women, possibly even more so due to them having already broken away from societal norms. I don't care if a woman has a beard and legs hairy as a spider, and neither do I care if a man has to wear a bra or has a love for the most awful kitten print clothing. I certainly do not give a damn as to what's between their legs. A person knows their own gender far better than you ever will. Period. Now, I'm not asking you to fall in love with them, to date them and to marry them. But if you're not attracted to a person, don't be an absolute arsehole and go out of your way to give that person grief. You're an arse if you do it to a cisgender individual, and you're still an arse when you do it to a transgender individual. But as for if you simply cannot like or respect a person for who they are, a fact that affects you in no way, then that is your own narrow-mindedness. You shut up and you deal with it. Your own insecurities do not give you the right to degrade a person who statistically has one of the highest attempted suicide rates of any demographic, thanks to societal demonization. I only ask that you please let me know in private so I can avoid your prejudiced backside in future. But it's not like it's a one-way street. Cisgender individuals also have to feel torment over this. Consider the insult of tranny and how it is applied outside of the trans community to cisgender women who fail to meet societal expectations on beauty and behavior. Likewise, look at the way in which people attack the value of men by referring to the emotional anguish of male victims of such things as rape and abuse as girlish, as if trying to fight the deep psychological trauma these individuals face is a weakness and thus a trait of women. Discussion on whether trans individuals pass, as well as identity-based attacks upon cisgender individuals, are all the evidence anyone should need that we still need feminism in the contemporary West. I would go as far to say that you cannot claim to stand with trans rights in the fight against trans ignorance and transphobia, while simultaneously claiming that gender roles do not exist in society. The reason I state this is that if it were the case, many of the problems faced by the trans community would disappear. That is why I refuse to allow us to become divided by ignorance, whether this ignorance be internal or external. That is why trans activism and feminism are not contradictory or incompatible. That is why I would argue that they are in fact symbiotic movements, aiding one another in their ultimate goals.